Everyone.
Welcome to the Millennial Monologues podcast, where we talk about anything and everything relating to the millennial lifestyle. We are your hostesses with the mostesses. My name is Alyssa.
And my name is Lexi. Thanks, guys, for watching and tuning in on Tuesdays, 7 to 8 p.m. We appreciate ya.
Always. Today, we are going to be talking about unsolved mysteries. So this is going to be more of like a creepy episode, and we
keep saying for every episode, it seems like
the last couple. We are going to have only one unsolved mystery story each, because we're really going to dive in depth in some of these. Both of these are pretty popular. I feel like a lot of other podcasts have covered these also. But they're really fun to talk about, and they're really interesting. So we're just going to dive in right now, because we have a lot of content to cover. So Lexi, you go first. What do you got?
Okay, so for my story, I wanted to do something where I could just really get all the info, give you guys the whole scoop beginning to end, and then we can figure out, you know, how this unsolved mystery, what your own opinion is of it, because everyone has different opinions, because as with any unsolved mystery, nobody really knows the truth.
There's so many options of what could have happened. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so I have my opinions, and then when I give you the facts, you can come up with your own idea, and then everyone listening, you guys can come up with yours too. So I've just kind of compiled a list of everything that I know from this case, and I'll just kind of fill you guys in. So I'm going to be talking about the Jonbenet Ramsey case, and it is a story about a pageant girl who died, and nobody knows who killed her. So the story goes off. It starts off right at Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve night, Jonbenet Ramsey, her brother Burke, her mother Patsy, and her father John Ramsey, which that's how she got her name, John Ramsey. Jonbenet, they kind of turned it into this French name, because they kind of took from the dad's name John and then made it Jonbenet Ramsey. So they are at this Christmas party at a friend's house. They come home that night. They're just kind of like hanging out. Everyone decides to go to bed. Next morning, the mom wakes up and she sees that her daughter is missing. So immediately it's a missing persons case. So she calls the police, and she's frantically freaking out.
How old was Jonbenet again?
She was 5 years old, I believe. 5. Okay. I wanted to say 4, but I'm pretty sure she was 5.
Young girl. Okay.
Yeah. Well, she would be 25 now. So she was like 5. So she calls the police at 5:52 a.m. Sorry, I'm reading this, so I'm just like really bad at it.
Keep going. You know? 5:52.
So she says, you know, we have a kidnapping. There's a note left. My daughter's gone. She's freaking out. And actually, that's like an exact quote. We have a kidnapping. There's a note left. My daughter is gone. So the police officers are like headed on their way. They're coming. Oh yeah, here's a picture of her right there.
She's beautiful.
She was really known for being this famous pageant girl. Her dad was actually, he worked for Access Graphics, so they lived in a $15 million mansion. So that's kind of
military contractor. That's what Access Graphics did.
Okay, awesome.
So
thank you.
The whole idea for knowing that is that they lived in this really big house. So when they found out their daughter was missing, the police were instantly like, well, you need to check your whole house, because that could take, for the average family, you know, you can look in your whole house in less than 10 minutes probably, but like for them, they would have to search this entire, 30 bedroom house. Yeah. So the police come over, and they really one horrible thing about the story is that they really messed up the evidence, because they had friends and family come over just to search the entire house.
Yeah.
So everyone's looking.
Fingerprints everywhere.
Everyone's looking for her. The dad, of course, it has his friends all over, so their DNA's everywhere. So evidence is already tampered with. I don't know why the police told them, because it was actually told by the police to have people help them search. So there was a broken window in the basement, but that was found out that the broken window was actually broken months prior to, so that was cut out of the case, that someone didn't come in from the basement. There was no forced entry. So no windows were broken. The house had no alarm that went off. It was also snowing outside, and there were no footprints around any windows or on the door. So it was kind of clear that it was probably coming from inside the house. That's what a lot of people think. Well, the dad finds her inside of the wine cellar. It's kind of like in the basement where they keep like all the wine, obviously, wine cellar. She was wrapped up in a blanket, and she had passed. She was with a ransom note, and the note was signed SBTC. To this day, nobody knows what that means, who it is. It just ends with Victory SBTC. So I'll give you guys a little more info about this ransom note, because that's kind of something that gives clues. As you would think, most ransom notes should give clues of who the murderer kidnapper is, this person. So it was written on a notepad from the kitchen, which is odd because it seems as though they went in the house, took the time to write this ransom note in the kitchen on the kitchen notepad. And so that's kind of like a clear indicator, number one, that it's something's fishy going on inside the house. Another thing is that they asked in the ransom note for $118,000 as like ransom money.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
Yeah. So that's a key indicator, okay?
Very 118, that's a very specific number.
The reason it's a very specific number is...
specific because
Good.
That was the exact Christmas bonus that John Ramsey got.
The dad.
He received a Christmas bonus of $118,000.
Who all would have known that?
Someone that worked for him, or his wife, or anyone that knows him. So that was that's suspect.
Like tacky. Like, people don't like go around like telling people how much money their bonus was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Unless he did.
People don't do that. I mean, unless you just have like really weird social like issues.
So are you insinuating like it could be his boss?
I don't know. I need to hear the rest of it. But it's just weird that like he would have even told anybody how much specifically his bonus was.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that is interesting that it's that specific amount. Okay.
So the fact that the ransom note person knew is just a bit odd.
Yeah, exactly. It's just weird.
And the fact that it was on their own kitchen is weird. The handwriting also changes throughout, which that's not super suspicious. Most of the time, ransom notes, they're trying to hide their handwriting anyway. Yeah, what's suspicious is that the handwriting starts off matching Patsy Ramsey's, and it slowly doesn't.
And that's the mom.
Right.
Okay.
So the way that it matches is her Q's are the same. The S's have like the same like kind of curve, like the L's have the same curve. And then it changes. So you can tell that it matches. They immediately ruled out John Ramsey when checking for the handwriting. His handwriting just did not match at all, and they ruled him out as a suspect completely.
Just based on the handwriting?
Yeah. So the dad was ruled out. The mom, and there's more about the mom, what keeps her as a suspect in a little bit, I'll tell you. Also, another thing is that lines from the ransom note, certain like sentences, were the same sentences in movie ransom notes. So this whole ransom note was 3 pages long.
So what all did the ransom note even say? Because if she's already dead, what's the point of a ransom note?
So she wasn't dead at the time they wrote it. So it was like, give me 100 and this is not word for word. It's not quoted, and I don't have the exact ransom note written. If Ziggy has it, he can pull it up, but I don't know if he does. But anyway, it was pretty much saying, give me $118,000, not word for word.
And I'll give you your daughter back?
I'll give you your daughter back. But the whole thing, though, was using sentences that are in ransom notes in famous movies. And the police found this out. Like they, and plus, I think any person that maybe knows a lot of crime movies would know. So that was really odd. It seemed very rushed, almost like her death was an accident. like, oh, we have to write this down really fast. Like, let's do a 3-page ransom note and put this all together. That's kind of my assumption of what I got from this ransom note.
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully.
Oh, this is it.
We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction.
No.
We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At
Is this the real note?
We have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. It goes on for
a while.
Forever.
It's 3 pages.
It is,
and it's
the longest ransom note that's ever been written.
Which is weird because they're so concise. Like, that was the most bizarre thing about it, was her ransom note. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
Before I get to the part about her body and what was found on that. If you want to start with yours.
Okay. All right. So the case that I'm going to be discussing isn't about a specific person. It's actually about a group of people.
Okay.
So mine is called the Dyatlov Pass incident. So this incident is basically just as an overview about a group of hikers that went up a mountain trail and they went missing. Search parties went out and found some very strange evidence to make this whole case inconclusive as to what happened to them. So here are a couple of pictures. This happened back in 1959, so it's a really long time ago. As you can see, all the pictures are in black and white just because that's the type of technology that we had, back in the day. I'm going to read most of this because this article does a really good job at breaking down what happened on the timeline. There are lots of videos on YouTube too if anyone's interested in looking this up because it's really, really interesting. So it just starts out by saying in January 1959, 9 Soviet college students were killed under very mysterious circumstances, and it became known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. The reason why they call it that is because the leader of the group, his name was Igor Dyatlov. So basically, he was only 23 at the time. And basically, his team of 8 experienced ski hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute embarked on a journey to try to reach a mountain peak. So this is not a normal ski adventure. This is a very detailed and difficult path that they were trying to go on. But they're all professionals. They had all done expeditions like this before. Okay. None of the hikers were ever seen alive again. So basically from what was recovered from the cameras, they had read diaries of the hikers. A lot of the hikers had just kept, journals on a daily basis to just, document what they were experiencing throughout the hike. Cameras and things were found like that too. And so just based on all of this evidence is kind of what the conclusion is. But, okay, so investigators were able to piece together that on February 1st, the hiking team began to make their way through the then unnamed pass. Now, obviously, it's called the Dyatlov Pass. They pushed through some really cold climate towards the base of one mountain where they got hit with snowstorms that ripped through the narrow pass. Decreasing visibility caused the team to lose their sense of direction, and rather than moving towards the mountain that they were going for in the first place, they started to go west instead. So they were already kind of off the original path that they were looking for, okay? They accidentally went west and found themselves on a slope near the top of a nearby mountain. This mountain is known as Dead Mountain in Russian. I can't pronounce what it's actually called.
Did they know this at the time?
No, they had no idea where they were because the snowstorms were crazy. They had already lost their sense of direction. They had no idea where they were.
So they're lost on Dead Mountain.
Yes. Okay. In order to not lose any altitude, they had gained, and because the team obviously wanted to, get settled and camp somewhere because they were lost, they just decided to camp there. So on this mountainside, all 9 hikers would meet their end here near Dead Mountain. Okay, beforehand they had embarked on the journey, though, Dyatlov, the leader, had told a sports club that he and his team would send a message via telegram as soon as they returned from the hike, so that everyone knew that they were safe. So as soon as they got to their destination, they would let them know. On January 29th, or 26th, you know, that's obviously several days later. They should have gotten there by now. There was no communication from the team, and a search party was headed that way to see what had happened. They were obviously missing. So after the volunteer force found the campsite, because they you know, basically just went on a search. They tried to, you know, figure out what had happened. They had noticed that there was obviously a huge snowstorm because like trees were falling and things like that. Takes them forever. They finally found this campsite and all of their belongings are there. After the volunteer force found the campsite, Army and police investigators were sent in to determine what had happened to the students. When they arrived on the mountain, investigators intended to find a very simple scene. You know, maybe they had frozen to death. Maybe, you know, they had run out of food supply and were lost, and that's what happened. Yeah. But instead, they, remember, they were very experienced hikers. They found, like, a very interesting campsite. I'm, like, trying to kind of build this up. But basically, what they found was tents. I know, I'm, like,
so confused.
So they found all their tents, all their equipment, everything. Their tents were ripped apart from the inside. First of all.
So they ripped them open?
I guess. Their shoes were left there. Their shoes were off and left at the campsite. No bodies were there.
What?
So their shoes are gone. Their tents are ripped apart, again, from the inside. Okay?
How do they know it's from the inside?
Because whenever you go to try to rip something, you don't rip it your first try. You know what I mean? Like there might be like claw marks and things like trying and then finally the rip type of thing.
So it'd be like plopped out the other way, not inside. Okay.
Exactly. And the way it was folded and things like that. So yeah, it just basically says all the team's belongings and most of their shoes were left there. They discovered 8 or 9 sets of footprints from the team, many of them clearly made by people with either no socks or a single shoe on their feet. So they're like bare footprints in the freezing snow. And it's not like their shoes were off, like they had taken them off. Okay? And remember, they are very experienced hikers. Like no person would take their shoes off in the middle of a snowstorm like this and just start walking away from the campsite. Okay? The tracks led to the edge of a nearby woods almost a mile away from camp. I'm going to pause there.
So they walked a mile on snow.
Left their food, their tents, their shoes, jackets, diaries, cameras, left everything at the campsite, barefoot, through the tundra.
Was it all of their tracks, or was it, you said it was like 8 or 9? Mm-hmm. And how many people were there?
8 or 9.
Okay.
I'm going to pause there.
Okay,
Go ahead.
That's so bizarre.
Already really interesting, right? I mean, they're all students. They're all relatively young.
Yeah.
But again, they were very experienced, and this was, you know, a route that they had to get approved by the school, first of all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
well, the whole mile thing is just weird too. Yeah. Like I can't even walk.
The barefoot thing is
on
freaking me out. Like
in the morning.
They would like if they had consciously made that decision to walk somewhere to try to find help, they would have kept their shoes on, and their tents wouldn't have been ripped open. They would have just unzipped it and left.
We can actually come back to that because there is a scientific explanation.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
We like giving the supernatural paranormal explanations, and then you can be like, oh, by the way, you guys are idiots. Here's what really happened.
Yep. But either way, it's still unsolved. Like it's 100% unsolved. So all of these different scenarios that we're going to talk about in a minute, I mean, nothing's proven. So okay, you go ahead.
So we'll leave off with Alyssa's story there, and we'll come back to it. So now we're back to Jonbenet Ramsey, and I like this background music, by the way. This is good. It's creepy.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so she was found in the cellar. She's passed by now. The dad immediately picks her up, which is not good. That's automatically tampering with the crime scene
again.
But would you blame him? He's the father. You see your dead child. Like, I mean, I think any parent would pick up their child. So he picked her up, brought her upstairs. So the whole crime scene is kind of kaput now. I mean, his fingerprints and her body has been moved. Well, there's some interesting things when they performed the autopsy. There were fibers from Patsy's sweater on the duct tape over her mouth. Again, it's kind of weird. I don't know if I've touched base on this, but anytime a child has been killed, if there are the parent's fingerprints or anything of the parent on it, it's kind of like an obvious thing that might would be the case.
Right. Like
just because it's her
parent has probably touched her in the last,
Right.
Especially for a 5-year-old.
But the fact that her sweater fibers were on the duct tape is a little odd and suspicious. I mean, and also Patsy's very suspicious to me because of the handwriting. It was on the kitchen notepad. She was also strangled with an object from Patsy's hobby kit. It was like a sewing, kind of like a mom's like hobby kit. She was strangled. It was a word that I don't know how to pronounce. It was like it's a paintbrush something. I don't know if you know it.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know the word for it, but she was strangled with one of the mom's objects.
Okay.
So actually someone could be framing the mom, maybe. Someone could be framing Patsy. I don't know. But something that might rule her out, there were signs of sexual abuse. A mom can sexually abuse her own daughter, but it is very uncommon. It can happen though, so that's not completely ruling her out, but it is something a little odd that they did find that she was sexually abused before she had passed. They did rule it a strangulation though, so she was hit on the head very hard. She had passed out, but it looks like they just kind of finished her off by strangling her. I don't know if this is getting a little too gruesome for people.
It's okay. Just keep going with the evidence of the body.
And then another odd thing was that on her headstone, it says the date of her death is December 25th. But they actually did not know the date of her death, and it's still they're not sure if it happened the night of the 24th or the 25th, but the parents wanted to write December 25th, almost as if they knew. So that's a little strange too. So, one of the most strangest things that makes me think that her parents had something to do with all of this is that they had asked, kind of after all of this had settled and everything, they stopped contacting the police and detectives like altogether. Like the police were trying to get this solved and resolved, and the whole family was just seemed like they didn't want it resolved, and they just didn't want to contact the police. But they were very open to TV interviews, and they were being interviewed by like news stations and reporters and things like that, but they wouldn't talk to the police. So the police were like, why aren't you like trying to like figure this thing out? And when Patsy Ramsey was on TV, she was very dramatic, like really crying. It almost comes off as disingenuous or fake. But then again, you can also rule that out because a lot of people, when you're traumatized
kid dies,
and so
you're
upset,
probably going to be that upset about it.
You don't know how you're going to look. It could look like it's fake. Nobody knows.
But she could be very open to TV interviews, like just as her own, like, well, here's the evidence. Like, I'm upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
like
everything kind of makes her look bad, though.
Like this most recent killing where like the dad killed the mom and his 2 daughters, but he went on TV and was like, if you have them, bring them back. But then he ended up being the killer. That was like just last week. You know what I mean? People go on TV on purpose so that they could use that as evidence to be like, it wasn't me.
Right. So that's kind of what I was getting at, is that that could be a reason for suspecting that it's her. But the son, Burke, so at the time he's 9 years old, he says that whenever all of this was going down, he was asleep. And he woke up when the police showed up. So he seems very calm about all of this. Now, Patsy has already passed away by now, so even if, let's say, evidence somehow comes out in 2018 that she did do it, she's already not with us, so there's nothing you can do. My theory is that Burke had something to do with it, along with the parents, as a cover-up. So we'll talk a little bit about Burke in my next part. We'll do Alyssa's first, but we'll go into more about Burke and why I think that
he
the
was
brother,
only 9.
Yeah, but he has a history with violence.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right, so let me pull mine back up. So again, just as a recap, you know, we're talking about the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 people went on this, you know, adventure through the tundra to try to, you know, go on this mountain adventure excursion, and they ended up having to camp because they got lost. So Investigators find their campsite torn to shreds. The tents are torn out from the inside. And you can clearly see that they're all like friends. They're all happy. They're really excited to be on this trip. It's, again, with their school. They're all students. And when investigators find their campsite, bare footprints are like walking towards
not bare footprints, but bare footprints.
Yes, like not bare animal. Thank you. Good catch. Feet without shoes on prints are walking towards this forest a mile away from the remains of the campsite. Okay. So at the forest edge, the investigators discovered the remains of a small fire that the hikers have appeared to have built. Okay. So that was already evidence that they had like maybe paused there for a minute. Around the fire were the first 2 bodies that they find. So 2 bodies are there near the fire. Obviously done. One was a 23-year-old, one was a 21-year-old. The temperatures were between -13 degrees and -22 degrees.
Oh my God.
So I mean, it is just freezing. And that was on the nights of their deaths. The men's bodies were found shoeless and wearing only their underwear. No clothes. So the no clothes thing,
that makes a little sense.
most people are speculating that the others took their clothes off after they'd already died and used them for warmth.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I just thought, I've heard whenever you're so freezing,
you put your bodies together, take your clothes off.
Yeah, you take your clothes off.
But their clothes are not there. Okay? So that's weird.
So their clothes are just gone?
They're not near the bodies and they're not on the bodies.
They burned in the fire
gone.
then, right?
Who knows? Maybe. I don't know.
Aliens.
You don't know. They found the next 3 bodies, a 24-year-old and a 23-year-old. That's all it says, just those 2. So, I mean, the other one was somewhere in that age range. So they found the next 3 bodies who had died on their way back to the campsite from the tree forest thing that they had walked to. So that's 5 bodies right there. These deaths were odd because they were, like all the students had clearly died of hypothermia, they're saying, with no indication of severe external damage. It was not until the other 4 bodies were found 2 months later that the mystery deepened. So again, at this point, out of the 8 or 9 bodies, they've only found 5. And at this point, they're like, okay, it's what we thought. You know, they went out here into this miserable weather and they must have died from either freezing to death or hypothermia or exposure, you know, no food, things like that.
Yeah.
So everyone thought that this case was going to be closed and that the rest were just missing.
Yeah.
It took them several months to find all these bodies because, again, this excursion was so difficult. This was not like normal hikers could not go on these trails.
Were they all together when found, like the first 5 and then the last 4?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I think I'm going to pause again. So, again, the mystery deepens when the last 5 bodies are found because they're not in normal situations like the rest of them were. Like, you know, near a fire, shoeless, shirtless for some reason. Those other people had obviously died for the reasons that they thought they did, but these next 5, not so much. So.
You mean next 4?
Next 4.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, next
the number
4.
doesn't really.
Next 4 bodies, yes. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so the brother Burke, Jonbenet Ramsey's brother. Brothers are kind of known for being like roughhousey and like kind of violent. And so Burke was known for being a little more rough with her. So one of my suspicions is that that's him now. I believe he's 29 now. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I'm pretty, yeah. So
around that age, yeah, about 29, 30.
So at this time, like I said before, the police came. He had woken up then. So when the mom found the ransom note, she called the police. The dad found her body. All of this, he was still asleep in his bed. Then the police show up. I would say, 10, 15 minutes later, whatever time that would take. That's when he wakes up. So that's when he recounts in his interview, which we'll show in a bit, that he says that he remembers. So one suspicious thing is that in Patsy Ramsey's 911 call, at the very end, she thought she hung up, but she didn't. And for the last 3 or 4 seconds, you can hear other people talking in the background. Well, that doesn't fit her story because which, like I said in the beginning, when she found her, she called her and was like, oh my gosh, she didn't find her. She found her daughter missing. She called for a missing child. But you can hear people talking. I think it was Burke talking in the background. I think he has something to do with it.
Okay.
Another kind of weird thing is that there was pineapple found in Jonbenet Ramsey's stomach. Pineapple was one of her favorite desserts. And so one kind of thing that I've thought that some people think is that she
was lured with that.
She was either lured, or Christmas Eve night when they were all going to bed, Jonbenet Ramsey woke up. She decided that she wanted to have some pineapple as like a midnight snack or something. She goes downstairs. Her brother is eating the pineapple. She tries to get some from him. He hits her over the head, accidentally kills her. The parents find out. They're freaking out. They decide they need to cover this up. Let's write a ransom note. Let's fix this. One thing that I forgot to mention is that Patsy Ramsey was wearing the same Christmas sweater that she wore the night before on Christmas morning when she found her daughter. So
she would have, in an ideal world, she would have changed into like jammies or something before going to bed, and then had woken up.
Maybe changed clothes again. Maybe still wore her nightgown.
Well, assuming that she slept naked or in her underwear. If she gets startled awake, what do is you grab the clothes that were closest to you, and frequently those are the clothes that you wore the night before.
But she wasn't startled, though. She woke up like normal and just went to go wake up her daughter, and her daughter was gone.
That's the story.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. True. We don't know what's the truth. Some other kind of things. There was DNA of someone else under Jonbenet Ramsey's fingernails that could not be identified. That could be a clear indicator that it could somehow be a break-in. It could also just be someone else that she was in contact with, or some other DNA got under her fingernails, or it could be her scratching at someone, so we don't know. And it was also in her underwear. So that's also an indicator of sexual abuse.
Exactly.
We have to keep in mind she was a child pageant beauty girl. So pedophiles are going to really be attracted to that. So I can definitely see a pedophile somehow getting away with this, and that's why some unknown DNA could be in her fingernails and underwear. There are people, though, that came out and confessed to this, though. There was a guy in 2008 named John Carr, and he made up a story saying that he killed her, and it was very elaborate. He told the police that he killed her, but it turns out that he was nowhere near their house or even over in that area at the time it happened, and they ruled it out impossible for him to kill her. So he was just a crazed fan of hers, some random pedophile guy that wanted to claim the killing, which a lot of people do that. They'll say that they killed someone just to get that fame when they really didn't. Yeah. Which is so bizarre to me.
Well, a lot of people who are about to like be homeless, like maybe, they're in like a really, really tough financial bind. A lot of people, if they know they're about to be homeless and they have all these responsibilities, will claim to have done crimes just so they could get like a roof over their head. You know what I mean? In jail. Like at least I'll have a bed and a toilet. You know what I mean? So that's the most common reason. But something
crazy though, like he would be infamous for it.
No, for sure. But what I'm saying, that's the most common reason why people claim to do crimes that they don't actually commit, is because they'd rather be in jail with a roof over their head than be completely homeless and have nothing, especially in like colder weather, like you said it was in the winter. True. So who knows?
Another guy named Michael confessed too. What was strange about his confession is that he committed suicide before the police could find out if he did. So that doesn't completely rule him out as the killer, because I mean, the DNA of someone was on her. Then again, there was no forced entry, but a guy confessed and then he killed himself, so we don't really know. But then again, other pedophiles and other men confessed, so that's also unsolved as well. Also, they had a fake Santa come over to the house on Christmas Eve as some hired guy as Santa Claus. Easily a suspect. He could have somehow hid somewhere in the house or whatever and said that he left, which a lot of people don't really seem to think that it was the Santa. There's not much to
go off
of that. But also, I mean, if you have a random guy in your house the night before your daughter is killed, he is still a suspect, so that could be a potential suspect too. And then I think we'll go on to yours, and then we'll go more into
Patsy's death and Burke.
And then we'll show the video of Burke.
Okay. All right. So again, some of the bodies have been recovered, very normal causes of death for the type of situation that these hikers were in. But this is where it actually gets interesting.
Would you like to see one of them?
Yes. There we go. So
we should have done like a trigger warning.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's why I asked.
Some of these images can get a little graphic because some of the other causes of death for the remaining hikers is really bizarre, okay? So it says 3 of the hikers had fatal injuries, including one 23-year-old who had suffered significant skull damage. So when you talk about significant skull damage, that doesn't mean that somebody like hit him in the head with like a tree branch. Like his skull was punctured, his skull,
like
not
cracked.
just yes. So I'm just gonna keep reading it.
Like a boulder was like thrown at his head.
Right, like something along those lines. So significant skull damage to one of them, and then the other 2 had major chest fractures that could only have been caused by immense force comparable to a car crash. So like a car going like 50 miles per hour and hitting a bare body, that's the type of that is the type of like injuries these people had been facing. Okay, so the skull and the chest. So that's 3 different things that was, again, comparable to a car crash. So then the most gruesome part of the Dyatlov Pass incident was that one of them was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of her skull bone. Okay? So this is very strange that certain parts of her face would have been missing.
That's like a serial killer type thing, or an animal maybe.
Maybe so,
like a wolf eating her.
But if it was a wolf eating her, then it would have been like chunks like everywhere and not just.
Was it like precisely cut?
Yeah. I mean, for as much as they can tell, you know what I mean.
Like her tongue was cut out.
Yes.
Not
so her
ripped
tongue,
out?
her eyes, part of her lip, and then facial tissue and a fragment of her skull. So just her face though. Like, you know, if it was animals, they would have went for the more fatty pieces of your body. You know, you read all the time about whenever people do get mauled by animals, they go for like the legs, the butt, like the most meaty parts. And, they don't go for the face.
Now is time for another trigger warning.
Yeah, okay.
3.
Trigger warning.
Here we go. Let's see an image here.
1.
For those of you who are listening, you may want to watch the video on Facebook or on YouTube. There it is there. See how the eyes are missing?
Her eyes are gone.
So
that is again, like from a person. That's
this is just very bizarre. Like very, very bizarre how one person had all those other injuries, and then the other 3 again, 2 chest fractures similar to a car crash, and 1 head injury similar to a car crash. Okay.
Wouldn't it be weird though if she was the only one with like green eyes and everyone else had like brown eyes, or she was the only one with blue eyes? Like,
ooh, that is interesting.
Like,
I don't know what color the eyes were. And you can't really tell because all the pictures are black and white. So,
yeah.
Okay, then, so the last one, a body of a 24-year-old was in the same location, but with no severe wounds at all. So all these bodies are found in a very similar area, like the remaining
like they
4.
were like just thrown or like just
kind of dropped off there or something.
And
like,
they were totally fine.
So one of them, I mean, he was dead, obviously, but he was like, his body wasn't tormented with or tampered with at all, just a body.
That kind of rules out an animal, don't you think? Because an animal would just kind of eat off everybody, or a pack of something would eat off everyone.
Chunks of everywhere, not just the face. That's so weird that it was very specific to the face. So now they're saying that there's evidence that the hikers had used the clothes of the people who died first, like I said.
Sounds real and reasonable.
One of the remaining 4's foot was wrapped in a piece of one of the old guys who had died near the fire's pants. So that's indicating like maybe she had suffered from what's that thing that happens when you get really frozen on your foot? What is it called? Frostbite. Yeah, I was like, that's like such an easy word. I didn't write it down. Yeah, frostbite. So that's, you know, evidence that maybe that had happened. And the pants were wool too, like to keep it warm. And again, they weren't wearing shoes for some reason. No one knows why. Also like a fur hat and a coat, blah, blah, blah. So the mysterious circumstances of the Dyatlov Pass incident begged for an explanation, and many have put forward like lots of different scenarios as to what could have happened. Many Soviets suspected that their death was the result of an attack by local Ramsey tribesmen. So that mountain, that mountain that was that I had said earlier that they had ended up camping on, called Dead Mountain. So the language that that the actual title is from Ramsey tribesmen people. So it's, I mean, again, like this is all kind of in, you know, Soviet, like Russia.
Do they have proof that those people like lived and existed right there?
They have proof that there had been tribes before. Okay. So it's you know, this one's kind of in the air, but it basically just says the Ramsey people were largely peaceful, though. They had never had, you know, any sort of violent encounters with any other hikers or any like trespassers even. They would just kindly ask that they leave. So they were actually very peaceful people, and there was no evidence of the type of attack that they would have used on their bodies like they normally do for their prey, like animals and things like that.
Yeah.
So early on, the investigators also suspected that the hikers may have been killed by an avalanche to account for the intense blunt force trauma to the head. Maybe a rock had fallen in there too, but that doesn't explain any of the other deaths.
What if someone just got lucky though and they didn't get hurt at all?
Maybe, that's true. It's highly unlikely, though, that an experienced ski team would have camped in an area where an avalanche can occur.
Right, yeah, I was
so
thinking that.
There are definitely many signs that you can look for when you're camping to know that maybe an avalanche can happen here. Obviously, heavy slopes.
Or like a dangerous area to avoid, like they would know.
Exactly. Heavy snowfall, like near some sort of edge. They obviously wanted to camp on higher ground. And I mean, it's just, again, they're very experienced. Like they wouldn't have camped there if they thought that an avalanche was possible. So that was actually ruled out as well, but it was one of the possibilities.
So I've actually heard the theory on that because what you haven't brought up is that one of the Dyatlov Pass incident, originally there were 10 hikers. 9 of them died. The 10th one broke their leg in a trail incident, and so actually returned back to the lodge several days, maybe even a week before this happened. That's how they kind of even knew to really go looking for them in the area that they went looking for them in. And there are reports that this person said that the group was not getting along as well as they thought. And so what happened was it's theorized that they went out too far and didn't leave themselves enough time to get back to the place that they had planned to camp, and there was bad weather coming in. So they actually camped in a part that was avalanche prone just to be able to get out of the weather. And so that created the first incident where they were caught in an avalanche. Then they started to suffer from hypothermia, and there's a phenomenon that you alluded to earlier, Lexi, called paradoxical undressing, which is when the body starts to suffer from hypothermia, the body actually feels in your head like it is warm.
Like burning fire?
Yes, because what's happening is your body is shutting down all of the heat to your extremities to keep your core warm so that you can live. And so you start to feel unbearably hot, so you start to remove all of your clothes, including your shoes.
Interesting.
Do you think they could have all somehow gotten, like you said, they weren't getting along? What if some of those injuries were inflicted on each other because they were really fighting and things were getting really bad?
Like, they say that the trauma was so damaging to the body that it was literally comparable to a car crash. No, I could not physically damage you to the same extremity of a car crash. I couldn't. Like, physically, I couldn't. And we're about the same age as these people. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no possible way that we could, like, I couldn't punch you to the point where it would look like it was a car crash.
But you could gouge my eyes out.
Yeah,
you know?
I could, but
I'm trying to think about
eyes,
like the weird things, like the face and the eyes and the certain things.
The face and the eyes thing
like,
happened to a different person than the trauma, though. Like the face and eyes was one person, the chest trauma was to 2 different people, and then the head trauma was to somebody else. I'm gonna hurry up and wrap this up because we're running out of time, and I want you to finish yours too. Okay. So investigators also found that there was no evidence that an avalanche had occurred anytime recently in the region, and no avalanches had been recorded on site before that. Or afterwards since. Also, the bodies weren't buried very deep to where an avalanche would have run them over. But it's like Ziggy said, maybe they did camp in an avalanche-prone area just to camp because they were tired and cold. Other investigators began to test the theory that the deaths were the result of some argument among the group that had gotten out of hand, like we had said, possibly any romantic conflict, things like that, because it was a co-ed group. That could explain the lack of clothes. However, people who knew the ski group said that they were, that none of them were involved with each other. The skiers also wouldn't have been able to cause the massive injuries, to the head of each other, like it says, because it was comparable to a car crash. The cause of death does remain a mystery, but other theories, began to pop up. People started to say that maybe the hikers were killed by a menk, which is kind of like a Russian Yeti. Which this one to me is really reaching. Yeah, but the eyes and the tongue thing is what's really like stumping people because, animals don't go for the face, like we said. And then I don't think that, do they?
Yeah,
the eyes?
They go for soft tissue.
Okay.
So the eyes and the tongue are the softest tissue when a body is frozen.
Okay, that's true. When it's frozen. Okay. Blah, 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 because of the immense force and power also that the injuries, and things like that. Like, no human could do it. There were no cars, obviously, so they're thinking, what if it was a Yeti? I mean, who knows?
It's a Yeti.
Slight radiation on the bodies led to theories that the students had been killed by some sort of secret radioactive weapon. So once they did the autopsies, there was some slight radiation among every single one of the bodies that they had somehow found. I don't really know. But it says, though the radiation was largely discounted as a cause of death because a radioactive weapon wouldn't have, been very successful at that sort of elevation, it's possible that the ski hiking team was unfortunate enough to encounter testing of some sort of USSR weapon. So basically, to wrap it all up.
So like there could have been like a weapon nearby and like
maybe they could have been testing it out in the wilderness and somehow the radiation had went through everybody and made everybody kind of psychotic. Maybe, who knows? Basically, the point of this is censorship and secrecy of the USSR forced everybody to abandon this path of inquiry. They basically said any sort of testing, whether it happened or not, is a secret, and we can't give you any information, even if it does lead to the solving of this case. So they basically said, "Too bad, I'm not telling you if we were testing or not."
I actually have pulled up a picture of the guilty party.
Okay.
What? Oh,
there he is.
My God.
The Yeti from Monsters, Inc. It was him.
I really thought
But basically, since we're kind of running out of time, I do have a little bit more. But again, basically, these people went on a hiking trip, and their causes of deaths were all over the place. No one knows what happens. The bodies were scattered. There was no avalanche. Who knows? Unsolved. All right, continue with yours.
All right, let's finish this Jonbenet Ramsey unsolved mystery. So, we finished it up. Patsy, very well possibly, I think, could be. John the father has been ruled out. Burke is still a suspect. Anyone in the family, no matter even if you are suspicious or not, anyone in someone's family is going to be seen as a suspect whenever you're killed.
Especially when there's no forced signs of entry.
There was no forced signs of entry. So Burke had never done any interviews. He was a minor at the time. They're not going to interview a minor. It's kind of like those news integrity things. You're not going to interview a minor. Even as he gets older, he refuses to do interviews. His mom, like I said before, she was really open to do interviews. She was ready to cry. There's some clips you can look online of her crying, and her husband would be whispering in her ear, and then she would talk, and he would. This is also a conspiracy theory.
Don't fuck this up, Patsy.
Like he would be saying,
remember, just don't lose your cool. Yeah.
He'd be like, "I miss my baby," and she'd be like, "I miss my baby." You can watch it for yourself. You can look those up.
Interesting.
But Burke had not done an interview at all until recently. Dr. Phil had interviewed him. He was known as a kid for being very violent, and I thought personally that he could be, like I said with my story of how I think he hit her over the head. It could have been an accident. Was he violent
before that, or did this like situation traumatize him so bad to where he was violent afterwards?
Before. They had even said he was just a rambunctious boy, as most are. In his interview, though, something strange is that he's smiling the whole time, which, again, this is a very normal thing for someone to go through a traumatic experience and to recount it. Sometimes you smile. I know a lot of people, if they're at funerals, they smile. It has nothing.
What?
It has nothing to do with being psychotic or being an evil person. The brain sometimes, if you can't think of something so traumatic or so heartbreaking, your body kind of makes you smile to kind of get rid of it. But also smiling is an indicator of someone that has no remorse.
Guilt, yeah.
So it could go either way. Watch this interview, though. We'll show real quick. He really watches body language, watch his face, his eyes, and really see for yourself whether you think he's being genuine or not.
Are you aware of these different theories that are out there? Theories that you killed your sister, theories that your mother killed Jonbenet, and theories that an intruder killed Jonbenet. Those seem to be the three camps that people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we were suspects. I didn't know they were camps, I guess.
And these are people that post online. The shorthand is RDI, Ramsey did it, IDI, the intruder did it, or BDI, Bert did it. Do you know the theories that they set forth in saying that your mom killed Jonbenet?
I don't know the details, but I know the ransom note, they think the handwriting match.
Have you seen it? Have you read it?
I don't think I've read the whole thing. I've definitely seen pictures of it, though.
Did the handwriting look familiar to you at all? Had you seen it ever before?
No. I feel like the listen carefully is very distinct, and I've never really seen that. I don't know, I've never really looked at it closely because I'll see it and kind of get taken aback, and it's not something I really want to look at like a lot, you know?
Right. Does that look like her handwriting?
Honestly, looking at that, she would always bug me about having good handwriting, and she would like make me rewrite stuff to try to get me to have good handwriting, and I think it's too sloppy.
That is, I don't really know what my opinion about that is. I mean, he seems uncomfortable and he seems nervous, like
very uncomfortable.
But like whether he's guilty or not, a lot of people would be nervous talking to Dr. Phil, first of all, because it's like a celebrity thing, and then it's also like he knows
borderline accusing him of killing his sister.
I just think that since he was so young, the only possible, this is my opinion, the only possible scenario of if he did it or not was what you had said earlier. Maybe he hit her because he was like fighting with her, because kids and siblings, they fight with each other all the time.
They
maybe
don't mean to kill each other.
Yeah, maybe he hit her too hard and the parents tried to cover it up. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is a hard one.
Yeah, and it's also just strange why she would call at the time that she called. A lot of the things for sure don't add up. If you want to watch the full interview, I would, because there are certain parts where he mentions, you know, like I went to the funeral and one of her eyes was open and one was closed, and he's like kind of smiling about it, and it's kind of eerie the way that he talks about like her dead body. And to me, if this daughter is in the limelight, she's a famous pageant queen. She's probably bringing in a lot of money too,
maybe
as well as the father.
Of her, yeah.
He was jealous. There could have been some jealousy. Maybe that's a reason for her death. You know, there's really it's unsolved. So some people think it's Burke, some people think it's Patsy. It could be an intruder, even though there was no evidence of an intruder. It remains unsolved. Whatever you guys think, let us know.
Okay.
I happen to have a picture of the killer.
Who is this now? Here we go.
Oh my God.
The Yeti from Monsters, Inc.
If you're listening, he did not show the killer.
Yeah, that is funny.
Someone listening's like,
all right,
oh, man.
Well, That was interesting. If anyone else has any insight into either the Dyatlov Pass incident or the Jonbenet Ramsey case, please feel free to comment your opinions or your information below. Otherwise, on the next episode of the Millennial Monologues podcast, we're going to have on a guest. This guest is going to be sharing her story with us on her journey of becoming a mother at a very young age. So we'll get to hear the story of that and how, you know, her life was affected and changed from that. So it'll be very interesting, very cool to hear. And that's what's coming up next time.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Tune in every Tuesday. Bye.